Hello, role-playing people, and in this episode we're taking a look at Abyss Mysticism for Vampire the Masquerade, one of the scariest and insanely powerful collection of rituals. I will not use the term sorcery here because this practice really has very little to do with any other path of sorcery that I might have mentioned in previous episodes. For the purpose of understanding Abyss Mysticism, I have made use of books such as the revised Lasombra clan book, Chaining the Beast, the Player's Guide to the High Clans, the 20th Anniversary Dark Ages Vampire Core Rulebook, the DAV 20 Companion, and the DAV 20 Tome of Secrets. The very first thing I want to look at is the accessibility of these rituals. Is this practice dependent on social status or factional allegiance? The short answer is no, not really. I was very surprised to learn that, according to the revised edition clan book, once a century, the Fiends of the Night authorized the teaching of Abyss Mysticism to a vampire outside of the clan, if such an individual performed a great service to the Magisters. This, of course, bestows only the right to practice the magic, not teach it further, and any violation of this understanding results in destruction. Within the clan itself, is Abyss Mysticism accessible to anyone? No, not really, because, as the clan book tells us, there have been times throughout the centuries when Lasombra occult libraries were raided by the Tremere, and the warlocks gained access to some of the Night Clan's knowledge, which is probably how the thaumaturgical path of shadowcrafting came to be. To prevent such things from ever happening again, access to this knowledge was restricted. It is not easily accessible. Make no mistake, the practice isn't banned for those who are not mystics, like no one will destroy you for knowing one or two initiation rituals of the Abyss, even if you are a crusader or a corsair or one of the faithful, but more often than not, such knowledge is kept and used by the mystics. In the 20th Anniversary Dark Ages Core Rulebook, we are told that Montano, Lasombra's favorite child, dabbled in Abyss Mysticism and also the eldest favored the mystics, which, as you can imagine, will have those who acted towards the destruction of the eldest and, well, most of the Sabbat Lasombra thinking twice before engaging in such practices or interacting with the practitioners, even though Gratiano is also known to have toyed with the rituals of darkness. Make of that whatever you will. The second thing to look at is the mystic's position or role within the clan. It is important to know that they are marginalized members of both sect and clan that most Lasombra interact with only when forced by circumstances, when in need of a serious service. This is actually no surprise, given that the Children of the Abyss, for all their power, have only one goal, that they pursue collectively, which rarely aligns with the interests of larger Sabbat society. They might even blur the lines between Sabbat and anti-tribu, since the tenets of their path would actually bring the two together, though anti-tribu mystics would have quite a high difficulty interacting with mortals after a certain level of initiation, and the Camarilla wouldn't be happy to have a mystic within or outside of its cities. The third thing to look at is how the other Lasombra factions regard the darkness. We know each of them reads and embodies a different aspect of shadow in their practices. What is probably the majority of the Lasombra considers Obtenebration to be their birthright, a tool for them to use in ruling the night and crushing any opposition in the nightly jihad. It's a constant pursuit and preservation of power. No inherited intrinsic moral obligation or duty here, other than the external obligations and duties imposed by the clan. They've earned this right when Gratiano diablerized the eldest during the revolt, the right of each individual to decide what this means to them. Such magisters rarely ponder the origin of Obtenebration. Their pack priests give them a few easily digestible morsels of lore, and off they go, tending to the nightly duties for both clan and sect. The second aspect of darkness that Lasombra embody is archetypal and religious, and it is here we're going to look at two distinct perspectives, that of the faithful and the perspective of the Black Angels. The faithful believe themselves damned servants of God, even though they fully embrace their role as agents of darkness, seeking to challenge creation and challenge the light while sorely testing humanity. They do so out of devotion and a divine duty which they consider bestowed upon them by God. This doctrine was beautifully embodied by the currently defunct Cardinal Ambrosio Luis Monsada. On the other hand, the Black Angels, or Azaneali, as a bloodline of Lasombra turned demon worshippers, believe themselves infernal agents of hell. They make it their sworn duty to oppose creation, banish all light, and deliver the world to evil and darkness, reenacting the roles of demons very much in step with the doctrine of their Bali progenitor, Azaniel. The book Chaining the Beast does a somewhat dated but splendid job at explaining these two views when it says that the faithful consider the abyss a place that God intentionally left in darkness and they are its keepers, while others believe that God's light simply couldn't illuminate the abyss because the abyss fought back and rejected God's light. This second version is not exclusive to the Black Angels, which is why in some game supplements, the Path of Night has so many different subpaths and variations. However, what makes these two visions sides of the same coin is that both regard the condition of darkness through an Abrahamic or Zoroastrian lens, since a lot of the Obtenebration powers include the name of Ahriman. Whether they believe the abyss to be a place, a shadowy, cold hell, or the manifestation of a dark, evil deity, both views start from the same premise, which offers a very brief creationist explanation and simply encourages devotion and duty over further inquiry. What more is there to seek if Obtenebration is the Lasombra's divine duty? All that remains is to practice what you've been taught without neglecting larger sect duties too much. This brings us to the fourth aspect of darkness, as explored by the mystics. They are painfully aware that the only certainties they have regarding Obtenebration and the abyss are uncertainty, blood, darkness, and ritual. Before explaining what I mean, let's briefly look at other ways of magic. Other sorceries we've mentioned in previous episodes always imply some form of pre-existing knowledge regarding the origin of such powers and a solid set of principles by which the magics work. When it comes to thaumaturgy, for instance, we know it is rooted in dynamic hermetic magic, and it is a translation or an adaptation of that magic into a linear, fixed form that vampires can also use, though they are unable to perform dynamic magic. It always functions according to a clear set of principles: blood, will, formula. We know Giovanni Necromancy was born of the Cappadocians' practice of mortis, and it makes use of violation of taboos and authority. The necromancer's very existence brings the energies of the low umbra closer to the physical world, and experienced practitioners can slip into, if not fully reside, within the Shadowlands. Examples can continue, but my point is that a lot of these sorceries are not only based on fairly clear principles, but the consequences of utilizing them are known. to the practitioners because of centuries of experience. A thaumaturge is aware that botching the casting of their magic will take a toll on their very will. The experienced necromancer has walked the Shadowlands and has seen its dangers, whether we're talking about the Tempest or specters or the elusive ferrymen. When it comes to the rituals of the Abyss, almost none of these elements are known. We're talking about a darkness that mystics believe predates the light of God. How did it come to be? Is it animated only when controlled or conjured by the Lasombra? Is it a place or an entity or both? Maybe it is the eldest, a sort of manifestation of hunger or cold, or all of these things at the same time? Is it an entity? Does it have any notion of morality? How was the practice actually discovered by the eldest? And to all of these questions, the answer is, we don't know. Everything currently known about Abyss mysticism comes down to a handful of manifestations and rituals beyond those of Obtenebration, the fact that the rituals work, and the fact that the Abyss is very real and inhabited. The whole purpose of Abyss mystics is to grasp and to understand what that darkness is, because as soon as any Lasombra steps outside the assumptions and supposed lore of other factions, they come to realize they have no idea what the Abyss is or why they can draw power from it. Some of the books that came out before the 2004 Player's Guide to the High Clans, books that cover paths of morality, always seem to associate the practice of Abyss mysticism with evil, or the desire to bring about an age of darkness, as if it were an extension of the path of night or other pre-existing paths that Lasombra might follow. Had this been the case, it would have easily integrated them into other factions, which occasionally dabble in this kind of magic. But starting with the revised clan book and all the way into V20 or DAV20, we're always told that the mystics are rarely encountered, even by members of their own clan. They reside within the dark corners of Lasombra society. They are super reclusive, keeping to themselves, and are sometimes reluctantly called upon by other magisters for either clan or sect business. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I do believe the Player's Guide to the High Clans is not only the first write-up for the rituals themselves, how they work and what they do, but our first brush with the actual tenets of such practices, or should I say proto-tenets of such practices, because this book encourages players to use a variant of the Road of Bones when playing mystics, modified to focus on primordial darkness rather than death. This is actually wonderful when it comes to playability, because it keeps the path profoundly inhuman, as it should be, without forcing notions of good or evil onto it. This perspective was continued all the way into the Dark Ages 20th core book, where we finally get a complete hierarchy of sins and some more explanations regarding the philosophy of its practitioners. Personally, I believe this is a smashing idea. I absolutely love it, because using the Path of Night as a base for the Abyss mystics' morality hits a dead end very quickly, both playability-wise and lore-wise. Now that I've collected and presented all of this information, we can finally say what it means to be a practitioner of this path. To be a mystic means to dispense of all religious and moral preconceptions and the shallow lore that most Lasombra are anesthetized with, and actually observe Obtenebration and the Abyss in all its forms and manifestations. It is to give yourself completely to the study and understanding of the Abyss, which, if stared into long enough, will more than stare back. This is why mystics don't really have a place in the sect or even clan politics, because they rarely concern themselves with such things. The notions of good and evil or even God mean nothing to them, for they have been given access to something far greater, and what they need to do is set aside all human fears and dive right into it, allowing the abyss to teach them. In my eyes, this makes them the absolutely bravest Cainites of all others, because previous experiences have shown them a single moment of cowardice or carelessness can cripple them for eternity or result in their destruction or even worse. I will remind my dear listeners that other sorcerers are often aware of the risks of their trade. Degeneration comes as a loss of confidence in one's own mental fortitude and will, or it can come as a raging, uncontrollable specter within the tempest. When it comes to abyss mysticism, the risks are still being discovered with every new step. The only way to acquire knowledge from this dimension of darkness is to take a huge risk exploring it with the assistance of the rituals and hopefully gain information you can share. As such, it is of utmost importance to work with other mystics. It's one of the basic tenets of the path, something which would be inconceivable for your traditional nihilists. Just how the Lasombra came into possession of such rituals, we don't know. We can only imagine that millennia of experimentation with shadow has shown that the manifestations of obtenebration can be fed vitae in highly ritualized fashion and awakened to some form of intelligence. They have made discoveries and continue to make discoveries still. If we consider the way Obtenebration lore and then abyss mysticism rituals were written, it really gives all things abyss a feeling of chronology, exploration, and discovery from one book to the next. If we look at Obtenebration, we can definitely see that its manifestations are drawn from some alien realm of darkness, making use of the practitioner as a conduit. The Shroud of Night, or the Arms of Ahriman, don't seem to have any will of their own, but are under the control of the Lasombra. With Black Metamorphosis, the Magister integrates that darkness within their own physicality in a strange form of symbiosis, and with Tenebrous Form, the Keeper becomes unliving, immaterial shadow. Even the advanced disciplines are further extensions of the Lasombra's own power, whether they use the abyss to fortify certain manifestations against daylight, or create equipment out of the shadow stuff, or illusory duplicates of themselves, or even to instantly travel from one shadow to another, provided both are in sight. All of these things seem quite benign, nothing more than an extension of the Lasombra's own volition. But immediately after a mystic of the abyss pierces the murk and attunes their senses to better perceive this dimension of darkness, they can learn that, you know what, I'll just read this one from the Player's Guide to the High Clans. The Shadow of Hands That Serve. Level 1 Ritual. This ritual summons the smallest beings that dwell in the abyss and grants them brief existence in the material world as servitors of the mystics who invoke them. Such entities are not demons or ghosts or true spirits, but rather something else that defies comprehension or classification. All that is certain is that they hate light, hunger for life, and bear a malign cognition that would shatter the sanity of any who truly understood it. Although the creatures summoned with this ritual are harmless, they make excellent spies and are so called the Eyes of Ahriman. Ah yes, so the abyss is not only a place, but it has inhabitants, it has things that dwell within it. Their malign cognition would shatter the sanity of any who truly understood it. It is here we can see why the pursuit of abyss mysticism is fundamentally incompatible with humanity and everything humanity knows or wishes to know about primordial darkness. There are rituals that leave marks on the practitioners, visible taints which never subside, they can never be undone. There are rituals that, if botched, bestow permanent flaws, and also rituals that turn the denizens of the abyss against the mystics, which is almost guaranteed to result in final death. Let's read another ritual really quick. Drinking the blood of Ahriman. Level 3 ritual. By drawing the shadow essence of the abyss into himself and infusing it with his blood, a mystic who knows this ritual may undergo a frightening transformation. System. The mystic summons a nocturne, aka a shroud of night, and cuts her palm with a knife that has never tasted blood. Chanting softly, the mystic flicks blood into the nocturne, drawing its hunger into her wound. The shadow melds into the palm, traveling through the veins to suffuse the vampire's entire form. This painful process takes half an hour. During this time, the vampire is at -2 dice from the cold agony of the fusion. At the end of the ritual, the vampire's player rolls manipulation plus occult, difficulty 8. Failure means the fusion is unsuccessful and the shadow escapes to the abyss. A botch means the shadow drinks 1 point of blood per one rolled before departing. Success causes the vampire's skin to darken noticeably and her eyes to become the impossibly inky black of the abyss. In this augmented state, all physical attributes lower than her Obtenebration rating rise to that level. All Obtenebration powers up to level 3 receive a -2 difficulty, and the blood cost to grow or expand an arm of Ahriman is halved. The Void Augmented Vampire must spend a number of blood points upon awakening each night equal to her Obtenebration rating. Failure to pay this surcharge immediately revokes the transformation. In addition, the vampire's shadowy form takes triple damage from sunlight and her appearance drops by 1 dot while this ritual is in effect. Side effect. Once a vampire spends more consecutive nights in spectral form than her highest virtue, the darkening of her skin becomes permanent. This resembles the darkening of an elder Assamite and grows more pronounced the more frequently the mystic casts and maintains this ritual. I'll stop reading here, though it's worth knowing the abyss is full of shadowy denizens which were actually further presented in the 20th Tome of Secrets, with creatures like the Umbriferous Man, an abyssal riddler who speaks 100 languages at once, or the Blatherskite, a headless, torsoless entity composed entirely of limbs. Summoning such entities isn't even the result of powerful rituals. These are barely the initiation. Truly powerful rituals of the abyss allow the practitioner to sink into torpor and converse with the abyss itself, or if a mystic's generation allows it, to physically enter the realm of darkness. There is no shadow step shenanigans here. Oh no, the practitioner can step into the abyss that is full of horrific entities, cold and hungry, and ties all shadows of the world together. This is about as sanity-shattering and non-Euclidean as it gets, so if there are any mediums or necromancers listening to this, do contact Lovecraft and tell him about the abyss. He is going to love it. Not only does this thing tie all shadows into a sort of knotted path that spits in the face of space as we know it, but it turns out the abyss can be made to perceive through all shadows in the world, which is why it can share a lot of knowledge with the mystics. To really ice the cake, powerful mystics can take others on their journeys through this place, which will result in the complete annihilation of sanity for those who are not initiated. Speaking of non-initiated, I will turn your attention to the clan book really quick and offer a very personal opinion that everyone is free to ignore. I don't think the Friends of Night would teach Abyss mysticism to anyone outside of the clan, and here's why. Though the rituals of the Abyss are supposedly shrouded in mystery, we, the readers of White Wolf books, can clearly see the pattern. The rituals rely heavily on the practice of obtenebration. Indeed, some books point out that a mystic can learn rituals only up to their level of obtenebration. Not only is this signature discipline passed down through the blood, unlike the previously discussed Koldunism, but practitioners of mysticism need to be experienced enough and fortified enough to withstand and control the entities and manifestations of the Abyss that are brought forth. To use an expression that amuses me quite a bit, one does not casually summon terrors of the Abyss on a Saturday night for a few laughs with friends. So, for this reason and the reasons previously mentioned, I don't think Lasombra would teach this discipline to anyone outside of the clan. Heck, the clan barely interacts with the Children of the Abyss, so I doubt they'd want to make more of different clans. On this note, how many mystics are there? Well, when it comes to Lasombra embraces, the clan book tells us that only 1 in 5 Lasombra will survive their first 5 years of unlife. 1 in 5! Out of those, very few will have what it takes to become mystics, and out of those who do, fewer still will survive their brush with more serious rituals of the Abyss, and only a very handful of them will ever set foot in the Abyss. That is something each storyteller should consider carefully. There are maybe quite a few kindred who dabble, but very few who become mystics. Though the 20th anniversary edition does a splendid job at describing the denizens of the Abyss, the ethics of the path, and, well, a hefty collection of rituals giving us insights into just how the Abyss manifests itself, within the setting from a character perspective, very little lore is actually confirmed. To practice Abyss mysticism is to fully accept a high probability of final death or worse in the name of knowledge. From conduit, to summoners, to wanderers in the primordial outer darkness where anything can happen, the Children of the Abyss are, again, the bravest of all Cainites. On a personal note, my own experience playing a mystic has been absolutely amazing. With the group back then, we agreed that due to unfamiliarity with newly acquired rituals, I would make the roll with my eyes closed. The rolls were always handled in this manner when it came to extended rituals like calling the Hungry Shade, or rituals that allow observation through shadow, like the level 4 Reflections of Hollow Revelations, or of course rituals that allow direct communication with the Abyss, like level 5 Whispers in the Dark. This is a fantastic way of integrating the fear of the unknown and the excitement of anticipation into something as simple as a dice roll. Just keep your eyes closed or cover them with a sleep mask. When it came to non-extended rolls, I would roll each die separately and just listen to the other player's vocal reactions, which were oftentimes misleading. There you are thinking your ritual is going to fail and you'll be torn to shreds, and when you open your eyes you see a solid pair of 10s looking back at you. It's just magical. But I almost forgot to answer some lovely comments from 2 of our listeners, Łukasz Alves and Łukasz Sarnacki. Is this abyss tied to the abyss of Demon the Fallen, or is it tied to the idea of hell? Though the more recent write-ups don't really lean in that direction, opting to make the abyss a complete mystery waiting to be discovered, I really don't see why the denizens of the abyss can't be wraiths who were snatched up by imprisoned fallen and turned into something else. Also, the idea that the abyss is evil, while often taken at face value by a number of the Lasombra, cannot be disproven by the mystics in any way. So really, each storyteller is free to work with the players and hopefully surprise them in regards to what the abyss actually is. I imagine if it were the pit of Demon the Fallen, Lasombra would have fully understood that already and probably would have found a way to make use of the prisoners of the pit. Maybe it's not that, but could it be an adjacent region, a vestibule, a prelude to oblivion? Entirely up to you. So there we have it. Abyss mysticism, a highly ritualized call to freezing hungry sentient darkness in the hopes that it will speak in turn and reveal more of itself. Thank you very much for listening. I'm super happy to announce that the Old Country has received its community tab, which means I can interact with you and share things like character sheets or artworks outside of the episodes. Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.